وأحلوا قومهم دار البوار جهنم يصلونها وبئس القرار وجعلوا لله أندادا ليضلوا عن سبيله قل تمتعوا فإن مصيركم إلى النار قل لعبادي الذين آمنوا يقيموا الصلاة وينفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع فيه ولا خلال الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به من الثمرات رزقا لكم وسخر لكم الفلك لتجري في البحر بأمره وسخر لكم الأنهار وسخر لكم الشمس والقمر دائبين وسخر لكم الليل والنهار وآتاكم من كل ما سألتموه وإن تعدوا نعمة الله لا تحصوها إن الإنسان لظلوم كفار وإذ قال إبراهيم رب اجعل هذا البلد آمنا واجنبني وبني أن نعبد الأصنام رب إنهن أضللن كثيرا من الناس فمن تبعني فإنه مني ومن عصاني فإنك غفور رحيم ربنا إني أسكنت من ذريتي بواد غير ذي زرع عند بيتك المحرم ربنا ليقيموا الصلاة فاجعل أفئدة من الناس تهوي إليهم وارزقهم من الثمرات لعلهم يشكرون ربنا إنك تعلم ما نخفي وما نعلن وما يخفى على الله من شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء. الحمد لله الذي وهب لي على الكبر إسماعيل وإسحاق إن ربي لسميع الدعاء. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. ولا تحسبن الله غافلا عما يعمل الظالمون إنما يؤخرهم ليوم تشخص فيه الأبصار مهطعين مقنعي رؤوسهم لا يرتد إليهم طرفهم وأفئدتهم هواء. صدق الله العظيم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A quick update for the parking lot construction. MashaAllah, as you can see, the construction has begun. Phase 1 is the demolition and exportation. It has been accomplished. We are in the process of getting permits from SCE, from Water Department, from the Planning Commission permits, and the bidding from the contractors. It's not a child's play. MashaAllah, it's a huge project, and the quality has been maintained so far, will continue to be maintained in the future also, including the parking lot construction, which requires sub-training. It requires all the drainage systems to be properly designed and installed, including the drainage, electrical systems, internets, Wi-Fi, low voltage lines. They all have to be installed before the construction is completed. Takbir. I'm here to also tell you, they were thinking constantly out of the box. Regular construction is done by concrete and by black chalk. That's not it anymore. New materials have come into play for the construction of parking lots. So alhamdulillah, we are studying those. Including on the side, we are also studying the solar panels, a different subject, to provide energy to our building, inshallah. So it will, inshallah, continue to progress. His brother Hijazi for quick announcements. I should tell you, right after the Salat, inshallah, today we also will have, and we are fortunate enough to have, a world-renowned munshid amongst us, Ahmad Daghameen. So he is going to do his famous nasheed also, right after the Salat. Here are your quick announcements.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, as you know, once we moved into the new building, our expense increased. So we need your help with this. We can't just, bring in the same weekly donations that we used to bring in our old masjid into this masjid. We ask you please to help this masjid out when you're leaving. The donation boxes are in the back. And please help this masjid, it is in your need. And please remember, this is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're helping the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second thing, alhamdulillah, today we have Brother Jihad Turk. He'll be giving us the khutbah. We will be having family night tonight, inshallah, starting 7:30. Or after Maghrib, which is around 7:30. Next week's khatib will be Brother Bilal Zaheen. We have our Eid picnic at Lomira Park, inshallah, September 2nd for this masjid. So please join us and bring your family and the children on September 2nd. We have a Hajji welcome night, and we're welcoming all the Hajjis who come back from Hajj on September 7th. So please join us for that night as well. Alhamdulillah, we had a successful Eid event. We want to thank you guys all for cooperating, for those who volunteered there that day. Jazakallah khairan. If there are any overflow in this musalla, please join us downstairs. We have extra space for those who come in late. The Quran Academy is open for registration, and so is the weekend school. Please talk to Sheikh Anas, Brother Abid, or myself to register yourselves or the children. And please make dua for those who are sick, and especially for those who are in Yemen after the bombing. Please keep on your dua, and please keep those who passed away in your dua. Jazakallah khairan.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. We praise God Almighty. We praise Him and we thank Him. For He is not only the Lord of the heavens and the earth and the creator of all therein, but He is our Lord and our Creator. And we declare our belief that there is no deity worthy of worship except for God Almighty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we declare our belief in all of the messengers and prophets that He sent throughout human history as a guide for humanity and as a mercy, including our belief in the seal of all of the prophets, our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My dear brothers and sisters, we find ourselves just a few days after the Eid al-Kabir, Eid al-Adha, the Eid of sacrifice, the Eid in which we commemorate the great faith of our beloved Prophet Ibrahim. And reflecting upon his story brought me back to reflecting upon the seerah, the biography of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who described himself as coming with the tradition, with the faith of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He came, as he says, adding another brick to the foundation or to the edifice, the building of faith, that is, built by his brethren and his fellow prophets and his ancestors, including the prophet Ibrahim. And in reflecting upon his biography, I remembered growing up as a young boy being told that I should love our prophet, that we should love the prophet as much as we love ourselves or even more. And I remember wanting to love the prophet because I was supposed to, but I'm going to confess, I did not grow up loving our prophet. And the reason why is because I didn't truly know the prophet. And it wasn't until I became a teenager and I began my spiritual journey at the age of 16, 17, I began reading a biography of his. And I found another biography, and I read that, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, until I fell in love with the prophet. My heart softened, and I began to love the prophet. And the reason why I began to love the prophet is because I saw in his biography a human being like myself who was struggling and striving to do the right thing, to be a good person. And yes, he received revelation, and he is special, and he has isma, and he has the barakah of being a prophet and a messenger. But never was he elevated beyond the status of being a human being. Someone who had feelings and emotions and trials and tribulations and difficult situations that he had to struggle through. And it was precisely because he had to give his human effort during those times that I can relate to him as a fellow human being trying to do the right thing. And so in today's khutbah, in the first part, I want to reimagine how it is that we narrate the story of our prophet to ourselves and to our children, so that we can do a better job of not only appreciating him and his faith and taking from his example that which will be of benefit to us, but so that we can also do a better job of telling his story to the world in which we live. Because if the world truly understood his example, we would be elevated and uplifted as a world, the entire world community. When he was a young man and was a believer in the one true God and refused to worship false idols, he was fine doing that. And he just didn't partake in the common practices of his fellow Arabians at that time, his fellow tribesmen in Quraysh or the other people who lived in the deserts of Arabia. And so things were fine. He was a good, upstanding person. He was, although orphaned at a young age, it was probably perhaps because he was orphaned and because he lived in a society in which orphans were not well treated. They were not well regarded. They were not taken care of. Maybe perhaps because of that, his father dying before he was born, his mother dying at the age of 6, that he felt the plight of those who were marginalized in society. Maybe that prepared his heart to be more sensitive to those who are not empowered in the world and in the community. And so when he did have access to his grandfather, who was a powerful person, the leader of the tribe of Quraysh, and his uncle, Abu Talib, so his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, and they raised him, and he had access to seeing what a good leader was like. He learned from that example. And when at the young age, when he was just a teenager, he accompanied his uncle to a gathering that took place in Mecca on the occasion of a visitor from outside who was doing business with Quraysh, who was complaining when he got mistreated in the marketplace. Someone ripped him off, and they did so without even trying to hide it. They said, "We're here, I have my whole tribe here, you're a foreigner from out of town, I'm going to steal your money and there's nothing you can do about it." And so the person, he was right. He couldn't do anything about it by force. But he made a moral argument, and he complained loudly. What kind of a people are you here? This is before the Prophet was a prophet, before Islam. He complained about the injustice in that city. And the leadership of Quraysh, they felt embarrassed, and they gathered together for the Hilf al-Fudul, for this agreement that they ultimately made. They said, you know, it's not right that someone should come here to do business with us and be mistreated and be done an injustice. Let us all agree in this, all the leaders here from the various clans that make up the tribe of Quraysh, to stand up for anyone from out of town who is mistreated. We will serve as their agents of justice. And the Prophet later on, after he became a prophet, looked back at that occasion and said that he would not have missed, if that were to happen after he became a prophet, he would have also attended and ratified and agreed to that same agreement, because it stood for justice and fairness. And he said he wouldn't have missed that gathering for $1 million. Well, he said 100 red-haired camels, which is like $1 million. It was so important to him because of what it stood for. So imagine this young man growing up in this context, believing in only one God, surrounded by people who also believed in God the Creator and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As it says in the Quran, if you ask the people around who created the heavens and the earth, they would say Allah. But then they would worship their idols to get blessings and as good luck charms, basically. And so he lived in this environment. And when he also saw not only the disbelief in just one God, the theology that was astray, but he also saw the mistreatment that arose from that. The way that young girls were buried alive if they were the firstborn, their families hoping that the next born would be a male, because they thought it was shameful to have a daughter as a firstborn and honorable to have a male as a firstborn. He saw the injustice and the mistreatment of slaves and the poor and the orphans, and it troubled him. And when he was married to his wonderful wife, Khadija, and had the time to reflect, he went to the mountain of Hira and was not only worshiping God, but probably also reflecting upon the ills of society. And when the revelation came, it was equal parts correct belief and social justice. Correct belief and standing up for what is right, what is true, what is good. And so he began to preach. And when he did so, the people of Quraysh, they didn't mind that he worshiped one God. They just said, stop criticizing these other gods. Why? Because the people of Mecca had a vested interest in the status quo. They were making a lot of money because they had a couple of important things in the desert of Arabia. They had water through the well of Zamzam, and they had the Kaaba, which was a source not only of spiritual blessings for all the tribes of Quraysh recognized that, and they even had their idols there on top of just the Kaaba. But because the Kaaba was there, it created a safe zone. No Arab tribe would engage in warfare in the whole area around Mecca. It was considered a sacred area. That's why when you go for Umrah or for Hajj, you put on the Ihram at a certain zone. That whole zone, you're not supposed to engage in warfare. There's some smaller precinct around Mecca, but nonetheless, there's a safe zone around the Kaaba. And because it was a safe zone, and because they had water, and because they had the Kaaba, and people used that as a stopping point on their trade routes, they had a big marketplace. And the Quraysh did a lot of business, and they had a vested interest in the status quo. So when one of their own came along and said, these are false idols, you shouldn't worship them, but also you shouldn't mistreat a slave, and you shouldn't bury a girl alive because you consider it shameful. This is nonsense. Because he criticized their ways, the people of the Quraysh wanted to silence him. They said, if you want to worship just one God, go ahead, but don't criticize all of these other things. And they tried buying him off. We'll pool our money together and make you the wealthiest. He said, no. We'll let you marry the most beautiful woman amongst us. He said, no. you can put the sun in my right hand, the moon in the left. I will not give up this mission until I'm dead or succeed in doing so, in conveying the message. And so he persisted, and they tried different ways to try and silence him. They tried to engage in character assassination, suggesting that he was crazy. But people heard his words. They were so beautiful and eloquent, especially the Quran. It was the most eloquent of speech, and they loved their eloquence in Arabia at that time. And so here he was preaching to the people, and the Quraysh were not happy with it because he was criticizing the customers' religion, which was to worship these false idols. So they put someone who was on the entry zones of the city, saying, don't listen to him. He'll cast a spell over you. He's a magician. He'll enchant you with his words. But people listened anyway. And you know who listened primarily? The marginalized, the down and the out, the disenfranchised, the poor, women, slaves, orphans. They found resonance with his message because their hearts weren't cluttered with material gain, with the status quo. They were free to listen to the truth of his message, and it resonated with them. And they started embracing his faith in large numbers. Now, because they couldn't touch the Prophet, his uncle guaranteed his safety, and his uncle's clan guaranteed his safety, they started going after his followers that were weak. And so he started the struggle, looking for a safe place for them. He tried all different ways. He tried preaching to the leadership of Quraysh, but they were impervious. They were not open. Then he ended up sending a group of them to Africa, to Habasha, to what's now Ethiopia. And there was a just Christian king there who received them and gave them protection. But it wasn't the solution that he was looking for. He kept trying in different ways. And it was a young man from Medina, from Yathrib, which later became known as Medina, who came from a war-torn village where the Aus and the Khazraj, the two major tribes there, had been fighting and feuding. A blood feud. One person gets killed, and then they back and forth from each tribe. And he was looking for a solution. He was looking for a peacemaker, and he heard the message of the Prophet, and he said, I see in him a peacemaker, someone who could bring us peace and reconcile our two tribes. So he went to him. He embraced Islam, and the Prophet sent him back. The next year he came again during the Hajj with more people. He sent him back again. The third year he came with over 70 people, men and women from both the Aus and the Khazraj. The two warring clans, they saw in him a peacemaker. And they met at a place called Aqaba. And they made a pledge and an oath to him at that time. And they put his hand on his hand. And they pledged to protect him and all of his followers if they made the migration to Mecca, or to Medina from Mecca. That they would protect all of the believers. My dear brothers and sisters, sometimes when you hear the story of the Prophet, we think that everything was laid out smoothly for him. But you see when you study his seerah that he was a human being who was trying to fulfill the mission that God gave him. And when he tried it at Ta'if and got chased away by sticks and stones, when he was rebuffed by the leadership of Quraysh, when he tried different things and didn't succeed, he didn't give up. He kept trying until finally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the way for him. But it was through his effort, his human effort, and his persistence, and his pleading to Allah to help him, that finally he found a way forward. And in my second khutbah, inshallah, I just want to leave you with two short speeches that he gave. The first one is when he arrived in Medina, and the second one was at the Hajj al-Wida', one of his final speeches, major public speeches. So let us, on this day of Jummah, open our hearts to loving our Prophet, for he is a blessing that God has sent us and sent to all of humanity to teach us how to be fully human. Adu Allah yastajib lakum. Ask Allah, you will find him most responsive. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. My dear brothers and sisters, if I were to ask you, what in essence was the message of the Prophet? what would you say? What would you say? How would you summarize most succinctly what the essence of the message of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was? And I'm going to share with you two short speeches. The good news, his speeches were short. Two short speeches that he gave. The first one was when he arrived in Yathrib to establish the new community of faith. And he laid the foundation for what makes a healthy, harmonious community, even while they were at war with each other internally. And he said the following, he says, and I'll recite the Arabic, it's a hadith, Ya ayyuhal nasu, O mankind, O people, afshu salam, spread peace, which means give peace, to say peace to one another, assalamu alaikum, etc. But make peace. Peace is an action. It's a verb. All right, to be a peacemaker. All right, to engage in peacemaking. So forgive one another, overlook the faults of one another, and reach over across the aisle to the other person and embrace him or her. That's number one. He said the second thing, he said, وَأَطْعِمُ الطَّعَامِ, and feed those who are hungry. Give food. Give food to those who are in need. Share food, share resources with those who don't have any. Those who have, share your resources with those who don't have. How can you have a peaceful society when people don't have the basic needs that they require to survive? In order to have a peaceful society, you have to have a safety net. You have to be embracing of one another in their basic human needs. What kind of a society leaves people starving, so impoverished that they go hungry, they don't have enough to sustain themselves? The third thing he said, وَصِلُ الْأَرْحَامِ, and maintain family relations. So although he's coming with a message that is revolutionary, it's upending the way that they were used to and the traditions that they were familiar with. However, he said maintain family relations. And sometimes the hardest relationships to maintain are family relationships, because those who you're closest to, they can become most irritating. You see their flaws up close and personal, and it impacts you and it affects you. So to be able to maintain family connections is essential for a strong community and society. And lastly, he said, and the first three have to do with interacting with other people, spreading peace, sharing your resources, and maintaining your relationships with family. Even the ones that you might not like so much. Maintain the family connections. And you can't just say, well, he or she cut ties with me first, so I'm going to cut ties back. Allah tells us in the Quran, وَالَّذِينَ يَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. Those who sever what God ordained to be connected, family relations, and spread corruption, they are the ones who are true losers. This is a commandment from God to maintain family connections. Those first three are about society. What's the last point that he made in his first khutbah? In his first speech there, it wasn't a khutbah, but his first talk. He said, وَصَلُّوا فِي اللَّيْلِ بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ, and pray at night when other people are asleep. What does that have to do with creating a strong foundation for a community? My dear brothers and sisters, when you have a deep connection, a strong connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have a deep well to draw from, a deep well of love and beauty that you can draw from when you're required to spend it in forgiving your brother, in spreading peace, in sharing your resources, and not being attached to your worldly possessions, and in maintaining family relations. It's all dependent on your connection to Allah, and what is the most sincere prayer is the one that only Allah knows about in the middle of the night when no one else can see you, because there is no hypocrisy in that. It's something that is in secret that you do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ بِالسَّلَامِ. If you do all of that, then you'll enter paradise with ease, as the Prophet said. And lastly, in his final khutbah, he makes 3 points. I'm summarizing a little bit. He makes 3 main points. Paraphrasing, summarizing, reducing it down. In his final words, not his absolute final words, but his final major address of the ummah, at the Hajj al-Wada' in front of thousands upon thousands of pilgrims, he says the following 3 points that are as relevant today as they ever were in human history. He says, number 1, don't be racist. No white is better than black or black better than white, Arab versus non-Arab, etc. He says none of you is better than the other because of your race. You're only good depending on your character. Your status and your rank before Allah depends on your character and your piety and your God consciousness. So don't fall into the trap of racism, and this is something that is plaguing not just our world, but unfortunately even permeates our community. For although we pray next to each other, leaving no gap, do we also intermarry? Do we also invite one another for meals at our homes? Do we do business with one another? Don't be racist. And if we get it right, then we could be an example to the society in which we live. Because America, as diverse as it is plagued with racism till today. And we see that playing out at the highest levels of politics and at the local levels as well. We can be the lead on this because according to Pew in 2015, the Muslim American community is the most racially diverse religious community in this country. So we can set the bar for what it means to be racially integrated as a community. Number 2, he said, your property and your lives are sacred. Haram. Sacred. Do not unjustly take from someone else's property, and do not injure another person, because your blood is sacred. Each other's blood is sacred. And yet we find ourselves, we just heard about a bombing in Yemen and more bloodshed here and there all over the Muslim world where Muslims are fighting Muslims. And we make excuses and justifications for it. This was some of the final advice of our beloved Prophet to us. Don't take each other's lives. Don't treat each other unjustly. And yet we find ourselves 1,400 years later killing each other. And lastly, he said, be conscious of God in how you treat women. Fear God in how you treat women, especially those over whom you have power. And we see the Me Too movement in society at large, but we have a Me Too mosque movement as well, where Muslims are not always correct, appropriate in our treatment of women in the home or in the community at large. These were some of his final words of advice and admonition to us. Let us take heed. We still have time on this earth to fulfill the mission of our beloved Prophet. Let us ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. Oh Allah, forgive us for falling short in fulfilling this mission. Oh Allah, empower us with consciousness of you, with awareness of you, to do the right thing, to make the big decisions in our lives and the small ones that will be pleasing to you. Oh Allah, let us to reconcile our severed relationships with our families. Let us to share our resources with those in need. Oh Allah, let us to spread peace. Let us to be just in our treatment of women. Let us never to consider ourselves superior because of our race or our ethnic background or the language that we speak. Oh Allah, let us to consider each other's lives and property as sacred. Oh Allah, and fill our hearts with the light of the Quran and the wisdom of the tradition of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. أقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. استقيموا واعتدلوا واستووا تراصوا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر. إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. عيد مبارك إن شاء الله all of you. يا حجرة ضمت جمال محمد حويت كريما سيدا كاملا بدرا يا حجرة ضمت جمال محمد حويت كريما سيدا كاملا بدرا مضى العمر مني يا حبيبي مضى العمر مني يا حبيبي مضى العمر مني يا محمد وانقضى ولم تسمح لي الأيام أن أنذر الحجرة مقامك محمود وأنت محمد مقامك محمود وأنت محمد ورب السماء أعطاك حوضا وكوثرا يا عيني ورب السماء أعطاك حوضا وكوثرا قدم ما الله مقاصدنا قدم ما الله مقاصدنا وزال عنا جميع الهم وزال عنا جميع الهم صلوا على من به سدنا صلوا على من به سدنا على فصيح كما عجم قدم ما الله مقاصدنا قدم ما الله مقاصدنا وزال عنا جميع الهم وزال عنا جميع الهم حاشا إلهي يخيبنا حاشا إلهي يخيبنا جود وفضل علينا عم جود وفضل علينا عم قدم ما الله مقاصدنا قدم ما الله مقاصدنا وزال عنا الصفا قد صفت معنا، ليلة صفا قد صفت معنا، ونورها بيننا يقسم، ونورها بيننا يقسم. حاشا إلهي يخيبنا، حاشا إلهي يخيبنا، جود وفضل علينا عم، جود وفضل علينا عم. قدم ما الله مقاصدنا، قدم ما الله مقاصدنا، وانزل عنا جميع الهم، وانزل عنا جميع الهم. صلى على رسول الله.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله Akbar. Jazakallah khairan for today's khutbah, Brother Jihad Turk, and Jazakallah khairan Ahmed Daghameen for the beautiful nasheed. Jazakallah khairan. أرسل الرحيل.